Now, let us, without further ado, cross over to the border, which is with England and Scotland, and further north than that, a place called Stirling, where Neil Oliver is. Neil, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Good to see you.
Yeah, very good to see you too. Now, I didn't see the debate last night, and we've spoken to Kelly McCaskill this week on the show. We're going to be speaking to all the other parties as well. I'm going to ask you, first of all, what you made of it, because I'm reading what's been written about it, and it seems that Nicola Sturgeon got a bit of a roasting.
I thought it was a bit disappointing, to be honest. I'll be honest and say I'm not a big fan of these televised debates. That's just a personal take. I don't particularly think that's I think there are performers in that arena that are able to employ skills, and just because they can be successful in a debate, I don't know that it necessarily means that identifies the sort of person that should be, leading a country and making policy decisions. However, that said, I'm sure a lot of people were kind of disappointed that that it wasn't graced by the presence of people like Alex Salmond and George Galloway.
Yeah, right.
I think then if those alpha dogs had been in the room, I think everyone would have sat back and said, "Now we've got a party."
Now you've got a show, yeah.
But as it was, I thought it was a bit flat, really. Yes, the First Minister did field a lot of challenging questions from members of the public, who a lot of it was about what's the justification for, in this time of pandemic and in this necessity to focus all efforts on recovery, why would you promise to hold another undoubtedly divisive referendum on the matter of Scottish independence? Why would you divert people's attention away from rebuilding the economy, fixing education, fixing everything that needs to be fixed in the aftermath of this dreadful year that we've just been through? Why would you throw into the mix another divisive campaign about independence? And she did look uncomfortable dealing with a lot of that. Some of the other performers, Anas Anwar, the Labour man, was good. The other speakers, came across as capable,
and they took questions.
It was a lackluster event.
No, I'm a bit like you, Neil. I mean, I remember watching one of the debates that was held in one of our elections. I think it was the one where Nick Clegg was still running the Lib Dems, and there were so many people on the stage that they literally only had something like 35 seconds to answer each question, and it was impossible to make any kind of judgment at all based on their performances because they were so short.
Yeah, I think auditioning. It's something obviously that we've imported from America, and I think it's like a talent show. I think it comes out of the same stable as Britain's Got Talent and X Factor. It's just a spectacle to watch how people perform for 3 minutes under a spotlight, and whoever is deemed or judged to have won a debate, I don't think it translates necessarily into having identified the right person for such an important job as leading a country.
No, quite. Exactly right. But I mean, I suppose the addition of having questions coming from an audience as well, who were all, I think, on Zoom, because I've seen a couple of these on social media, also kind of jumbles it all up and complicates it in a way, because you're having to kind of concentrate on the quality of the call and the quality of the line and all of that stuff. And I'm not sure that it's the best way to find out what politicians actually think.
No, I think we've all, I mean, you and I, here we are, basically, well, it's a video call that we're taking part in, and it's just become such an enervating feature of life in a way that all our interactions with people, where you want to be in the room with people, because there's so much more, to be had from actually, being in a studio or in a theatre or in an auditorium where you can actually literally gauge the temperature of the room.
Yeah.
And yes, some people are better in the face of this emergent fledgling technology than others, and yes, you get distracted by pixelations and disconnections and breaks in the transmission, and it's just like everything's just suboptimal. Everything about the last year has just been inadequate.
Well, it has, hasn't it? And we've been sort of forced and made to put up with things that we otherwise would never have put up with. I mean, the news this morning that we got from Spain, that if you go to Spain on holiday, they want you to wear a mask on the beach. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. There's no chance of that ever happening. So I won't be going to Spain until such time as that's not there.
That's how I feel. And I wrote at the weekend there about the religious element that has undoubtedly come into the way in which COVID is being applied and the way in which people are following the regulations. I think I suggest that in the absence of organised religion, people don't believe in nothing; they believe in anything. And I think the rules that have been laid down in terms of the COVID lockdown have given people sets of rules to obey. And they've also, in the same way that a religion often does, it gives people a feeling that they have the right to exclude those who are other, those outsiders, those who are not submitting to the same rules and regulations. For a lot of people, religions perform other functions and give them other comforts in their life, but there are always those who are drawn to organised religion because it gives them the opportunity to exclude others.
Yes.
And I see that, and I'm quite sure, I'm 100% positive that no matter what happens in the next few months, there will be many, many people will continue to wear masks.
Yeah.
Possibly forever. I think there will be people who will adhere to some of these regulations, social distancing, hand washing, mask wearing, and other diktats, because they have drawn comfort from what has become an ersatz religion for people, and there are too many people who will take it as an opportunity to exclude. The vaccine's going to do the same thing. There are going to be the clean and the unclean, which there's going to be a two-tier society possibly going forward with these passports. And oh God, I just used the going forward line. Did you hear that, Mike?
I did. I tried.
I can only apologise. See that? It slipped in.
I know. It does happen. I mean, because you find yourself sort of scrambling about sometimes for words. And I mean, you and I, me to a slightly larger extent, spend a lot of time every single day talking, right? I was delighted to read this morning, and I'm going to come on to this in a minute with you, about this whole racial report which has come out, in which, Britain has been declared to be not institutionally racist. And a number of people who I've heard already this morning on various different broadcast networks sort of sounding disappointed that this is the case. It's quite remarkable. The people who make a living out of this kind of race industry, the people who have been telling us for months and months and months that we all have white privilege and that we basically should know better, not to criticise anyone who accuses you of racism, because you can't know what that's like because you're white.
Yeah, I've been desperate and despairing in the face of a lot of the running down of Britain that's been going on for years. Right. And I've spoken publicly in theatres up and down the country about my love of the British Isles, and it not being a blind love, and it not being a triumphalist, we are better than you kind of love. It's just a love of knowing a place intimately. Yeah. And when I hear Britain being run down, and let's say in this context as being institutionally racist, I always want to shout from the rooftops, compared to where? Yeah. I think there are racists in this country, as there are racists in every country. But to label a country as institutionally racist is, I think, completely wrong, and it's certainly not the case. And the results of that report, which I'm sure will be as applauded as they are criticised by the two camps, it's certainly what I think. The unconscious bias training, I find terrifying and dystopian. Yeah. It comes out of there's the implicit association test that was put together by two American academics, Mahzarin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald from Harvard and Washington universities, and they identified this tendency amongst people when basically the test showed that people tended to be quicker to feel comfortable in what they recognised as familiar, and to be not quite so instantly welcoming to what looked like the outsider. And this has become modified into thinking that people make these unconscious biased decisions. But there's also instantaneous perception in human psychology, which is innate. It's not even just human. People tend to feel comfortable when they recognise instinctively what they're familiar with. Yeah. So a white baby will be more inclined to be reassured by the presence of white faces, and a black baby will be more inclined to be reassured by the presence of black faces, or faces that look like your own. That's just
But
instantaneous
what if a white
perception.
baby didn't know that there were white people? If a white baby only ever saw black faces, then presumably that would be the comforting familiarity, right?
Absolutely. These are the problems with it. You become comforted by what you take for granted around you.
And what you see, yeah.
And what you see, and so it depends what you are surrounded by. That will make you comfortable.
Yeah.
And you will reflexively feel just you would drop your guard.
Yeah.
Where you unconsciously feel comfortable.
And this takes us back to what the problems are in this country, which I've been saying for a long time, are much more to do with poverty, much more to do with circumstance, much more to do with class than anything to do with race. Because, if you're surrounded constantly by people who deal drugs, you're more than likely to end up as a drug dealer. If you're surrounded by people who offer you the opportunity to do, academic things, you're more likely to go into academia. It's not rocket science, is it?
I'm sure that must be right. I mean, that just sounds like simple logical deduction to me. And I think encouraging entire populations, almost strong-arming entire populations into accepting that they're born bad, that they are genetically wrong.
Yeah.
Again, it's that religious element. I mean, that's just the return of original sin in another form. You're basically saying to people, believe me, you are born fallen. You are wrong from the beginning, and the most you can hope to do is make amends for the wrongness that is in your very nature. Now that's that religiosity that I'm talking about. And I think absolutely over the last year, the way in which education has been compromised for goodness knows how many millions of children in this country and around the world on account of lockdown restrictions. Well, we'll see in the years ahead the extent to which that has compromised people's opportunities.
Yes.
And the effect that has on people in the longer term. And yes, it's always the case that it's poverty and class and it's exclusion from education and those kinds of door opening opportunities that make the difference.
Yeah.
And to have people focus all their attentions on whether or not people are white, black, or brown, and whether white people are good or white people are bad from birth, I don't see that that's helpful in any way.
No.
If you're striving towards a civilization based upon equality of opportunity.
Yes, and a fair and equal society as well. And of course, the next battleground after this one is going to be the gender battleground. We saw yesterday that story from Australia where boys in a school in Victoria were told to stand up at assembly and apologise for all the rape that had taken place, not by them, but by men and by the male gender to girls at the school. The school have now finally worked out that wasn't a great idea, and they've now apologised to the parents for causing anguish. But I mean, it's quite extraordinary the numbers of people and the industries that have grown up around this kind of blame game.
That has to be wrong-headed, and even if it was the right thing to do, which it isn't,
right.
It isn't equally applied. I mean, one of the things that always happens in the aftermath of whatever terrorist atrocity, a perpetrator will be identified, and it very quickly becomes about their race and their creed and their religion and whatever. But society has become very attuned to saying, no, you can't just tar everyone who shares that race and creed and religion. You can't tar them with the same brush just because that one individual has done something dreadful.
Right. And
so why would you stand up all boys and have them speak out and share guilt for things they haven't done? Why would you say that? Why would you encourage boys? I'm the father of two sons. What on earth would possess a person to encourage their boy child to grow up thinking that he was inherently bad and toxic because he's been born male?
Yeah. But this is why it's no accident, Neil, that the people identified by this report as the most underachieving and most underprivileged are white working class boys, because that's where we put them.
Well, yes, that's a lot of the statistics, as I roughly understand them, yes, are showing exactly that the most hard done by, the most underachieving group in British society are white working class boys. But that's an uncomfortable truth for those that drive the alternative ideologies because it doesn't fit. And I just know that as a father of sons, and I have a daughter as well, and we go. I mean, our 100% of our effort all the time between the three of them is to encourage them to be respectful to one another.
Yes.
Full stop. You know, we just encourage them to treat each other decently, and we stress the idea that, you know, that there are no good people or bad people. You're not born like that. Yeah. All any of us has is the potential at any moment of any given day to do something good or to do something bad.
Yeah.
You know, and across your lifetime, you would hope, I would think, that you would have managed to perform more good acts than bad. But you can't tell people that because they're born white or born male that they're inherently toxic or they're more inclined to do bad things. That way madness lies.
Well, it is. It's a kind of twisted ideology, and I'm afraid that hopefully with the beginning of this report today, we might be able to sort of, blow some of that stuff up and stop people saying it, because it is damaging. And I think a lot of people who do say these things are unfortunately involved in education. They're involved in sort of, melding young minds, and I think it's time that they stopped. Before we let you go, Neil, let's talk a little bit about your lockdown situation, because I thought I heard yesterday, did I not, that you're now going to be given permission to go a little bit further afield than you've been allowed so far. I had a text message. I had a text message from a friend of mine who lives in south side of Glasgow, who said, I'm worried that the only chance you're going to get to see me is to come to Cambus Lang, which is about as far as I'm allowed to go. And I thought, that's never going to happen.
Do you know, honestly, Mike, as I've said to you before numerous times on this, I'm not keeping a close eye on this hour by hour, because the situation, just keeps on changing, right. And I've got myself into a kind of a rut here. Right. I just do the same things every day. I go on the same dog walk.
Are you wearing the path down? Are you wearing it down as you go?
Yeah. So I don't actually slavishly watch and pay attention to the idea that, this time tomorrow I'll be able to go another couple of 100 yards further away from the house. I don't honestly know.
Oh no, it's madness, isn't it? I mean, we're all looking forward very much to April the 12th, where we can actually sit outside a pub and have a drink. And it's ridiculous that that's the aim, and that's the kind of the great sort of manna from heaven, is that you can go to a pub but you can't go inside it. But that's as far as we go.
I said to my wife Trudy just today, just when we were out walking the dogs round the same path, I said, if and when I get asked to do something, I'm already nervous about it.
Right.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
I used to spend half my life on long haul flights to the other end of the world, and nipping in and out of airports and doing all sorts of things. And now the mere prospect of having to go and do something that I haven't done for a year is filling me with this kind of agoraphobic dread.
Right. Well,
it's only been a year of my life.
I know. I suppose the good news is it won't be like anything you've ever done before, though, because I'm similarly sort of not nervous as such, but I'm really not looking forward to getting on a plane for which I have to wear a mask. Because if I have to wear a mask for a 7-hour flight to New York, that is not an enjoyable thing.
Yeah, I'm already thinking I just won't go.
Yeah,
I'm not necessarily saying change the rules because of poor little me.
Yeah,
but I'm already thinking that it might be a coin toss, where I'm thinking if I have to spend 7 hours to Dubai and then 13 hours to Sydney to get to Australia, all about wearing a mask, I don't know if I'm going to go.
I mean, I'm old enough.
That just sounds like too much.
I'm old enough to remember the days when you got on a jumbo and you sat at the back and you smoked about 20 Marlboro Lights while you were travelling. And drank about 5 bottles of wine. I haven't done that for a very long time for obvious reasons. But I mean, this sounds like hell to me.
Yeah, no, I think again, it's all in and around that idea that it's giving people just new reasons to divide and to segregate into groups. Those who are. There's a great story from the making of, just before I go, A Bridge Too Far.
Oh yeah.
When they filmed that, and it was a cast of thousands, and the people were being drawn in, extras from the surrounding villages into the countryside to film battle scenes. Right. And the costume departments were handing out uniforms at random, first come, first served. Right. So some people got officers' uniforms and most people got, other ranks. Right. And by the first tea break, the people in officers' uniforms were refusing to sit with the guys of other ranks. They were wanting to group together.
That's great.
Because they had already identified themselves as separate.
Yeah.
that's innate to human
that's
behaviour.
it, isn't it? Because the people we're talking about now who are wearing masks and walking around in the outdoors with masks on, and there's the very same people who weren't doing that this time last year. Because I remember when it first all started, I would go, my big excitement was to go to Waitrose in Greenwich, for a Saturday morning. And nobody was wearing a mask, not one person, because in those days we weren't told to. But all these people that are now wearing them are only doing it because they've been told to.
Yeah, but people take, it's not a criticism, but there are many people who take comfort from being given sets of rules: food not to eat, times of the day to wash your hands, wash your face, words to say at certain times of the day, places to go, people you can talk to, people you can't. Now that gets folded into most of the organised great faiths of the world, and as well as being interested in the idea of a transcendent deity, a lot of people just take comfort and reassurance from following rules. I don't eat that because I don't eat that, and that's the church I don't go to. That appeals to an aspect of human nature. And for want of anything else, I think there's just an awful lot of people out there who've been handed a book of rules about COVID, and they're quite happy to obey it because it gives their day a scaffolding and a structure that holds it up. This is what I do. Here's where I go. Here are the people that I talk to and the places that I avoid. Yeah. And that plays into human nature. And it's going to be hard, supposing governments if they ever did want to get away from this, it'll be very hard to get some people out of it. Yeah. So that they're prepared to go and be in a crowded pub or be in a football stadium or just simply mix in a busy supermarket with lots of unmasked people. For a lot of people, that's going to be a kind of a breach of their new faith.
Or maybe a bridge too far, just to bring it back. Brilliant stuff. Neil, thank you very much indeed. Neil Oliver, archaeologist, TV presenter, thinker, a man who says some very interesting things. And I mean, that is extraordinary, isn't it, what he was telling us about that movie and the fact that the officers in the costumes that they were given wanted to hang out with the other officers. And the same goes for what we're going to talk about a little bit later on. The people who have been shielding apparently for such a long time, weeks, months, a year perhaps, are now told as of tomorrow they don't have to do it anymore. But the rest of us kind of do. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there.